The mansion was silent, too silent. The kind of silence that hides secrets. She stood at the entrance, staring at the massive iron gates before her. They creaked open slowly, revealing a path lined with dead trees, leading to a house so grand, yet lifeless, it sent a shiver down her spine. This wasn't what she expected. A single mother, struggling to keep food on the table, she thought this job would be simple: help an old man, get paid, and go home. But the moment she stepped inside, she felt it, an unexplainable presence in the air, like unseen eyes watching her every move. The butler led her through a dimly lit corridor, his face unreadable. No small talk, no warmth. Just cold professionalism. "He doesn't talk," the butler said finally, stopping before an oak door at the end of the hall. "He doesn't move much. Just do your job and don't ask questions." A strange warning. The door swung open. Inside, the paralyzed millionaire sat in his wheelchair, facing the grand window. He did not turn, did not acknowledge her presence. The fading evening light cast his silhouette in eerie stillness. She stepped forward cautiously, clearing her throat. "Sir? I'm here to take care of you." No response. She walked closer, trying to see his face. His expression was empty, but his eyes were alive, deep, searching, as if he were trying to tell her something. Then she saw it. The faintest twitch of his fingers. So subtle it was almost unnoticeable. And suddenly, she knew, he wasn't as paralyzed as everyone believed. Her breath caught. Something was very, very wrong in this house. And she had just stepped right into the middle of it. She didn't know how long she stood there, staring at his twitching fingers. It was barely noticeable, just a slight movement, but it sent a chill through her body. The world told her he was fully paralyzed, that he was nothing more than a shell of a man, unable to move or speak. But now, she wasn't so sure. A part of her wanted to ignore it, pretend she hadn't seen anything. After all, she was just here to do a job, bathe him, feed him, and leave at the end of the day. That's what she had been hired for, and she couldn't afford to mess it up. Her son was depending on her. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to look away and moved toward the bathroom. "All right, sir. Let's get you ready," she said, trying to keep her voice light. Still, no response. With practiced movements, she gently lifted him, feeling how rigid yet tense his body was. It was odd, he was supposed to be completely immobile, yet there was a slight resistance to his limbs, as if he was holding himself stiff on purpose. She wheeled him into the massive bathroom. It was larger than her entire apartment. The tub was already filled with warm water, the steam rising like mist. Someone had prepared it beforehand. Had they known she was coming? Something about this entire setup felt off. She unbuttoned his shirt with careful hands, but the moment her fingers brushed against his skin, she felt it again, a subtle, almost imperceptible twitch in his muscles. Her breath hitched. She glanced at his face. His eyes were locked onto her, unblinking. The kind of stare that wasn't empty, wasn't passive. It was a plea. A silent, desperate plea. She swallowed hard. Her instincts screamed at her to ask questions, but the butler's warning echoed in her mind: just do your job and don't ask questions. She lowered him into the bath, watching his expression carefully. The warm water enveloped his body, and for a brief second, she swore she saw relief flash in his eyes. Then, the door creaked open. She jumped, nearly slipping on the wet tiles. The butler stood at the entrance, his face as unreadable as ever. His eyes darted to the millionaire, then to her. "Is everything all right?" Her heart pounded. She forced a smile. "Why yeah, I was just about to start." The butler lingered, his gaze cold and assessing, before nodding stiffly. "Good. Don't take too long." Then, he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, the sound reverberating in her ears like a warning. Her hands trembled as she reached for the washcloth. She had the overwhelming feeling that she was being watched. But why? Why was a paralyzed man being monitored so closely? And why did it feel like he was trying to tell her something, without words? She continued the bath, her hands moving automatically, but her mind was racing. She needed to find out the truth. But if she wasn't careful, she might not make it out of this house alive. The night was too quiet. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the ceiling of the small servants' quarters. Her body was exhausted, but her mind wouldn't let her rest. Every moment replayed in her head, the way the millionaire's fingers twitched, the desperate look in his eyes, the butler's cold stare. Something was wrong in this house. She could feel it. But what was she supposed to do? If she asked questions, she could lose her job, or worse. But if she ignored the truth, she might be leaving a helpless man trapped in silence forever. She let out a slow breath and rubbed her temples. She needed answers. And if no one was going to give them to her, she'd have to find them herself. The next morning, she woke early, determined. Her first task was to get closer to the millionaire, to watch for any more signs of movement. If she could prove that he wasn't as paralyzed as people believed, then maybe, just maybe, she could figure out what was really going on. She pushed his wheelchair into the grand dining hall, where a servant had already set up his breakfast tray, a plain, untouched meal, as if no one cared whether he ate or not. Carefully, she lifted a spoonful of oatmeal, bringing it to his lips. "You have to eat, sir." His eyes met hers again, intense, pleading, afraid. She felt her heart clench. Then, it happened again. A tiny twitch in his jaw. A slight movement of his throat. He was trying. She leaned in slightly, pretending to adjust his napkin, and whispered low enough that no one else would hear. "Can you move?" A beat of silence. Then, the faintest blink. Not a normal blink. A deliberate one. Her breath caught. He was answering her. He could communicate. And she was the first person to notice. But before she could react, a voice cut through the room. "You're quite the devoted caregiver." She flinched, nearly dropping the spoon. A man stood at the entrance of the dining hall, tall, sharp-eyed, dressed in an expensive suit that didn't quite match the warmth he was trying to fake. Something about him made her skin crawl. She straightened quickly, masking her shock. "I just want to do my job well." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good. We expect loyalty in this house." Her grip tightened on the spoon. Something told her this man wasn't just visiting. And if she wasn't careful, she might be in more danger than she realized. She felt the stranger's eyes scan her, as if he was measuring her worth. He took slow, deliberate steps into the dining hall, his polished shoes tapping against the marble floor. The silence that followed felt dangerous. "Who are you?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Just a concerned friend of the family. "Liar." The millionaire stiffened in his wheelchair, his gaze locked onto the man with something that looked dangerously close to fear. She noticed it immediately. This man wasn't just a visitor. He was someone the millionaire dreaded. And suddenly, she understood. Whoever this man was, he was here to ensure the millionaire stayed silent. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to act normal. "I should get back to work," she said, stepping toward the wheelchair, gripping the handles like a lifeline. The man's hand shot out, stopping her. Her breath hitched. "Don't get too attached," he murmured, his fingers tightening on her wrist. "Men like him, they're just a paycheck, nothing more." She yanked her arm free, her stomach twisting in unease. The man smirked, but there was something cold in his expression, something that told her he knew more than he was letting on. Without another word, he turned and strode out of the dining hall, leaving a trail of tension in his wake. The moment he was gone, she dropped to a crouch beside the millionaire's wheelchair, heart racing. "Who was that?" she whispered. His eyes darted to the side, toward the large oak door leading to the study. A sign. A silent instruction. She swallowed hard. He was telling her to go there. The hidden clues. The afternoon dragged on. She completed her chores, fed the millionaire, followed the butler's orders, but her mind was somewhere else. When night fell and the mansion quieted, she made her move. She slipped down the corridor, heart pounding as she reached the study door. It was locked. She scanned the hallway. No one was around. Holding her breath, she reached under the doormat, because rich people never think to check the most obvious hiding places. Her fingers brushed against cold metal. A key. She slipped it into the lock and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a massive library, bookshelves stretching from floor to ceiling. But her focus was on the desk in the center of the room. There was one drawer slightly ajar, as if someone had forgotten to lock it. Or maybe someone wanted her to find it. She pulled it open, heart hammering. Inside was a USB drive. She grabbed it and scanned the room for a computer. She found one in the corner, dust-covered but functional. Plugging in the drive, she clicked on the only file it contained. A video. She hit play. Her blood turned to ice. On the screen was the millionaire, not in a wheelchair, not paralyzed, but standing, healthy, alive. The timestamp was from a year ago. Her hands trembled. That meant someone did this to him. And worse, whoever it was didn't want him to recover. She clicked on the next file, a document filled with financial records, bank transfers, contracts, evidence of something big. Something worth silencing him for. A business betrayal? A murder attempt? She didn't have time to process it. Because behind her, the study door slammed shut. Her stomach dropped. She wasn't alone. A shadow moved in the corner of the room. And a voice, smooth and terrifying, spoke from the darkness. "You shouldn't have seen that." Her breath caught in her throat. She spun around, her pulse thundering in her ears. The room was dimly lit, the glow from the computer screen casting eerie shadows along the bookshelves. A figure emerged from the darkness. It was the butler. He took slow, measured steps forward, his expression unreadable. But his eyes were sharp, calculating. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, his voice eerily calm. She swallowed hard, willing herself to stay composed. "I was just..." His hand shot out, grabbing the USB from the computer before she could react. "No," he said, pocketing it smoothly. "You were just making a mistake." Her stomach clenched. This wasn't just about breaking a rule. This was about power. Control. Secrets. And she had just crossed a very dangerous line. She took a small step back, her mind racing. Think. If she let fear take over, she'd lose her chance to help the millionaire. She straightened, forcing herself to hold his gaze. "I was only doing my job," she said carefully. "He led me here." The butler's expression flickered, just for a second. Then, he sighed, as if bored. "He's delusional. He doesn't know what he's doing. It's best if you..." A sharp noise cut through the room. They both froze. A knock. Not at the door. From the hallway. And then, footsteps. The butler's entire body stiffened, his cold facade cracking for the first time. He turned toward the door, listening. She saw her chance. Without hesitation, she grabbed the nearest object, a heavy book, and flung it at his shoulder. It wasn't enough to injure him, but it was enough to distract him. She bolted. Dashing past him, she flung open the door and ran into the hallway. The air was thick with tension. The mansion felt different now, not just eerie, but alive. She didn't stop running until she reached the millionaire's room. The second she stepped inside, his eyes locked onto hers. She rushed to his side, her hands gripping the armrests of his wheelchair. "I know," she whispered. "I know everything." For the first time, something in his face changed. A flicker of hope. A silent plea. And then, his lips moved. Her heart stopped. Was he about to speak? She leaned closer, her pulse pounding. And then, a voice from behind her. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" Her body turned to ice. She whirled around. Standing in the doorway, his face half hidden in shadow, was the mysterious man from before. And he wasn't alone. Two men in dark suits flanked him, their presence radiating danger. The man smirked. "You should have just taken the paycheck and left." She knew, in that moment. She was in deep, deep trouble. The tension in the room was almost suffocating. She could hear her own breath, shallow and ragged. She glanced back at the millionaire. His eyes were pleading with her, his face twisted in a mix of fear and urgency, but his mouth still remained shut. The man in the doorway, the one with the smirk, took a slow step forward, his eyes cold and calculating. His presence was overwhelming, like the air had become thicker around him. "You really don't know who you're messing with, do you?" he asked, his voice smooth but carrying an edge of danger that made her stomach twist. Her mind raced. She had to find a way out. There had to be something she could do. I don't understand," she stammered, trying to steady her voice. "What's going on? Who are you?" The man laughed softly, a low, almost mocking sound. "You want to know the truth, huh?" He paused, taking another step into the room. "You were hired to take care of a paralyzed millionaire, but what you don't know is that this man," he pointed at the millionaire, who was watching them with increasing intensity. "He's a liability. A problem that needs to be dealt with." Her heart raced. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, though she already had a sinking feeling she knew exactly what he meant. His eyes narrowed. "The truth is, your employer isn't a helpless victim. He's a liability because he knows too much. He was a business partner, but now he's nothing more than a witness to a series of crimes that we'd prefer to remain hidden. And as for you," he smirked, his eyes glinting with malice. "You've just become a liability too." Her breath caught in her throat. No, I didn't mean to." "Oh, but you did," he interrupted, his voice cold. "You snooped around. You found the files. You were digging into things you shouldn't have." He turned to the two men behind him. Without a word, they closed in, and her pulse quickened. She had no idea how much danger she was in, but she could feel it now. She had crossed a line, and there was no way out. But just before they reached her, the millionaire's eyes flickered, just for a second, but enough for her to notice. His eyes darted toward the window, then to his desk, then back to the men. It was as though he was trying to communicate something to her. In that moment, she understood. The millionaire had been watching, waiting, all along. He wasn't helpless. He had been playing along, pretending to be paralyzed so he could stay alive. He had been trying to find the right moment, the right person, to help him expose the truth, and she had just become his only hope. Without thinking, she lunged forward, grabbing the nearest object, a pen holder from the desk, and hurled it at the two men. The men dodged, but the distraction was enough. She turned to the millionaire, her hands trembling. "Can you move?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. His eyes flickered again, this time with clear intent. It was a yes. Her heart surged. He wasn't completely paralyzed, he had been playing them all along. With her heart racing, she grabbed the wheelchair and turned it toward the door. "Get us out of here," she muttered, half to herself. She couldn't believe the dangerous game they were both playing. But now, it was a game of life and death, and she had to trust him. The two men advanced, but the millionaire's eyes locked onto them, his face now filled with determination. Just as they were about to seize her, he muttered something, his voice weak but firm. "Now." She didn't hesitate. She wheeled him to the door, barely dodging the two men as they lunged for her. But as she reached for the handle, the door slammed shut. And from behind, she heard the sound of footsteps running toward them. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The door locked behind her with a definitive click, and she froze. The weight of what was happening hit her like a ton of bricks. She couldn't think. She couldn't breathe. The fear was suffocating, but she knew one thing: they had to escape. The two men were closing in fast, their footsteps echoing through the corridor. The millionaire, still strapped into his wheelchair, was looking at her with a mixture of hope and fear. There was no more time to wonder who was behind this. There was no more time for second guesses. She had to get them both out, and she had to do it now. The hallway stretched endlessly in front of her, and at the far end, she saw the grand staircase leading up to the second floor. If they could make it upstairs, there might be an escape route, another way out, somewhere hidden within the mansion's dark corners. But before she could take a step, a loud crash came from the direction of the study. One of the men had broken through. She turned to the millionaire. "Hold on, we can make it to the stairs, but we need to hurry." She pushed him forward, her hands trembling but focused. Her mind raced, wondering where the other servants were, if anyone would help her. But the mansion felt so isolated, so disconnected from the rest of the world. It was like the walls were closing in on them, suffocating their chances. They reached the staircase, and she hurriedly wheeled the millionaire up, using all her strength to get him to safety. But just as she reached the top, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her, and this time, it wasn't just the two men. There were more. Her heart pounded as she pushed forward, her hands slick with sweat. She glanced over her shoulder and saw one of the men coming up fast. His face twisted in fury as he reached for the gun tucked inside his jacket. No time. She turned down the narrow hall at the top of the stairs, her breath ragged. She didn't know where she was going, she just had to move. They were cornered now, and she had no plan. But then, as if by some miracle, she noticed something, a door at the end of the hall, half hidden behind a heavy tapestry. Without thinking, she darted toward it, pushing the wheelchair as fast as she could. She reached for the doorknob, but as her fingers touched it, the door opened. A man stepped out, his expression grim. "Get inside," he commanded, his voice sharp. Quickly. Without asking questions, she pushed the wheelchair inside, her heart pounding, praying they weren't too late. The man shut the door behind them with a soft thud. He locked it quickly, then turned to her. "You're lucky I got here in time," he said. "Those men would have taken you both down without a second thought." She barely registered his words. She was still catching her breath, still too shocked by the narrow escape. The man seemed to sense her disorientation. "My name is Jonathan," he said calmly. "I was sent to help you. They've been watching you both." She blinked in confusion. Who are you?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned his attention to the millionaire. "You're safe for now," he murmured, adjusting the wheelchair. "But we need to move fast. The people after you are powerful." She felt a surge of anger, but it was quickly replaced by a flood of questions. Who was Jonathan? What had happened to the millionaire? And what did they really know? Jonathan seemed to read her mind. "You don't understand the full story yet. But you will. You both will." The room they were in was small, barely furnished, and smelled of old books and dust. It wasn't much, but it was safe, for now. The millionaire's eyes flickered again, and this time, she knew he had something to say. His eyes locked onto Jonathan, then to her. Then, his lips parted. His first words in years. "They've been watching me for too long." The millionaire's voice, weak but filled with urgency, echoed in the room. His words were the key, the warning they needed. "They've been watching me for too long," he repeated, his gaze steady now. "I was never supposed to get out of that chair. But I learned too much. And now, they'll do anything to keep me quiet." Jonathan stepped forward, his face darkening. "It's worse than you think," he muttered. "They've been planning for this day, the day you finally woke up." The millionaire's eyes narrowed. "You don't know who you're dealing with, do you?" His voice was still shaky, but there was anger there now, deep, raw anger. "This isn't just about me. This goes far deeper than that." The tension in the room thickened. Jonathan looked at her, then at the millionaire, his expression resigned. "You've both walked into something much bigger than any of us. And now, they're coming for us. We don't have much time." She was still trying to wrap her mind around everything. The millionaire, her patient, wasn't just a paralyzed man, a helpless millionaire. He was someone who knew things. Dangerous things. And now, she knew them too. As the weight of their situation settled in, the distant sound of footsteps echoed outside the room. She didn't need to hear more to know what it meant. The men, the ones who had chased them before, were closing in. They wouldn't stop until the millionaire was silenced. And she had no idea what they would do to her if they caught her. "We have to move, now," Jonathan said, pulling her from her thoughts. "Come on, this way." The millionaire's chair creaked as Jonathan pushed him toward a hidden door in the back of the room, concealed behind an old tapestry. Her heart raced. Jonathan reached for the small key hidden under the floorboard, twisting it with a practiced hand. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow stairwell leading into darkness. Without waiting, Jonathan turned to her. "Get in. Quick." She followed, breath catching in her throat. This was it. There was no turning back. She wasn't just in over her head anymore. She was swimming with sharks, and the water was rising. As they descended the stairs, the footsteps grew louder, closer. But Jonathan led them through the dark corridor without hesitation. There was something about the way he moved, as if he knew exactly where he was going. Finally, they came to a door at the end of the hall. Jonathan paused, turning to her. "You'll be safe in there," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "But you need to understand something, everything you think you know, it's all connected." She was about to ask him what he meant when she heard it, the sound of running footsteps, louder than ever. "They're almost here," Jonathan said, his face hardening. "You don't have much time. Go. Get inside." She glanced at the millionaire. His eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else, determination. "Now!" Jonathan snapped. She didn't hesitate this time. She pushed the wheelchair through the door, into the dimly lit room. It was a small, hidden storage space, lined with old boxes and forgotten furniture. The walls were bare, and the only sound was the faint hum of the mansion above. As soon as she stepped inside, she felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. The walls felt like they were closing in, and she could still hear the men outside, closer and closer. Jonathan entered behind her, closing the door quietly. His eyes were hard now. "You don't have much time. You need to get to the east wing. There's a back exit there. I'll hold them off as long as I can." She opened her mouth to protest, to ask for more answers, but Jonathan shook his head. "Not now. The time for talking is over." He turned away from her and began heading toward the door. Before he left, he looked back. "Take the millionaire to the back exit. I'll cover your tracks." Without waiting for a response, he stepped out of the room, closing the door softly behind him. She stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the situation bearing down on her. This wasn't a simple rescue anymore. This was survival. And she was about to step into a world that was far more dangerous than anything she had ever imagined. She glanced at the millionaire. His eyes were no longer full of fear. There was something in them now, hope. She wasn't sure if they would make it out alive. But she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let him face this alone. The quiet stillness of the hidden room was now a suffocating silence. She could hear the distant echo of the footsteps, men searching the mansion. Their voices were muffled, but she knew they were getting closer. She turned to the millionaire, his face as calm as it had been in years, no longer the paralyzed man she had first met, but a man with purpose. His eyes met hers. "It's time." With a steady hand, she pushed the wheelchair toward the back exit Jonathan had mentioned. The air felt heavy, the tension unbearable. The millionaire whispered something under his breath, his words barely audible. "I've waited a long time for this moment," he said, his voice low but filled with resolve. "And you," he paused, looking directly at her, "you're part of it." For the first time, she felt the weight of the situation fully. This wasn't just about helping him escape. This was about exposing something much bigger, something he had been keeping inside for far too long. They made their way down the narrow corridor toward the back exit. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the mystery, the betrayal, the people who had been behind this, the same people who would stop at nothing to keep their dark secrets buried. As they reached the exit door, she heard the sound of footsteps, this time much closer. Her heart pounded in her chest. They were right behind her. She quickly opened the door, sliding through just as the sound of shouts erupted behind them. The door clicked shut with a soft sound, and they were outside. The night air hit them like a rush of freedom. They were finally out. But as they started walking toward the woods, the silence in the air changed. It wasn't the sound of danger anymore, it was the sound of resolve, the sound of a man finally taking control of his life. They walked for what felt like hours, the darkness pressing around them, until they reached a secluded area. She glanced around, her heart racing, but there was no one in sight. They were alone. And then, out of nowhere, a bright light flashed in the distance. Jonathan appeared from the shadows, panting. "We're not out of the woods yet," he said, his voice urgent. "They'll be searching for you both, but I've arranged for a safe place." She nodded, looking at the millionaire. His face was grim, but there was relief in his eyes now. He had finally reclaimed his freedom, and so had she. Jonathan stepped forward. "Listen, I can't be the one to expose all of this. But you can." He handed her a small briefcase. "Everything you need to take them down is inside. You have the power now." She looked at the briefcase, realizing just how dangerous this all was. She was holding the key to something far bigger than she could have ever imagined. "Why me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why not you?" Jonathan's eyes were filled with honesty. "Because they won't expect a woman like you to have the strength to fight back. They underestimated you. And now, you've become their worst nightmare." She took a deep breath, nodding. The weight of the briefcase in her hand felt like justice. She knew what she had to do. As they prepared to part ways, the millionaire turned to her. "Don't let them win," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're stronger than you think." For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. There was no escaping the truth of the moment. They had both survived, but the fight wasn't over. With a final nod, Jonathan disappeared into the shadows. The millionaire and the woman stood there, side by side, as the first rays of dawn broke across the horizon. The fight was just beginning, but she had finally found her strength. Life lesson. It's not the battles you fight that define you. It's the choices you make in the face of adversity, the strength you find when everything around you tells you to give up, that shape your fate. Sometimes, the greatest victories come when you least expect them, and when you choose to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost.